Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's presentation. I'm Kristen Lowatsky, a contributing writer to IBM Systems Magazine, and I'll be your moderator for this event. Today's webinar is entitled The Business Performance Revolution. Are you ready? Our featured speakers today are Troy Hayworth and Wilson Rains at GT Software. Troy is Vice President of Sales at GT Software. In that position, he's responsible for driving sales of GT Software's mainframe integration and data access solutions. Troy joined GT Software in 2013 and brings more than 19 years of direct sales and sales management experience, to his role. Prior to joining GT Software, he held sales and sales management posts at RX Networks, Intellione Networks, ASAC Jepson, ADC, and MSI. Wilson Rains is Vice President Global Alliances at GT Software. In that position, he's responsible for cultivating and managing partnerships to globally expand the implementation footprint of GT Software mainframe integration and data access solutions. Wilson joined GT Software in 2004 and brings more than 15 years of business development experience to his role. Prior to joining GT Software, he led sales and business development posts at Cicada, ClientSoft, and IBM. Our two speakers will be joined today by George Machini, CEO of Catapult. George has worked in the enterprise software field for over 15 years. As CEO of Catapult, he's helped establish the company as an industry leader in enterprise application mobility, where they help enterprise organizations outmobilize their competition by removing the security, integration, and development roadblocks to rapid, personalized mobile app development. Today, our speakers will share the newest trends in business performance. They'll also review how some large enterprise leaders have capitalized on their mainframe resources to revolutionize internal business performance and improve competitive positioning. Following the presentation, we'll have a brief Q&A period, so please feel free to enter your questions in the question panel at the lower right corner of your screen at any time during the presentation. Thanks again for joining us today. And now, without further ado, Wilson and Troy, I'll turn the presentation over to you.
Thanks, Kristen, and welcome, everyone. This is Wilson Rains. Just another quick reminder, throughout the presentation, we're going to be offering up a few polling questions. These questions help us understand if the content of this webinar is relevant and resonates with the audience. So when you get a chance, please take a moment and answer the questionnaire on the right-hand side of your screen, and then shortly afterwards, we'll share the results with you. So if we take a look at the first slide, we probably should have called this "The Mobile Revolution Is Your Mainframe Ready?" That's because mobile devices have become the centerpiece of our personal lives. It's profoundly changing the way companies relate to their customers, the way they interact with their employees, the way they bring products and services to market. Enterprise mobility is no longer just about being a pathway to convenience and efficiency in this new world of work, but also a key driver of business innovation. We called it Business Performance Revolution because enterprise mobility isn't just another IT project or a single application or mobile website. The most successful enterprise mobility strategies are built on strong collaboration between the business and IT. So over the next 40 minutes, we're going to take a look at the history of business performance and the role of the mainframe, the influence of mobility, past, present, and what's to come in the future, the recent drivers of continual performance improvement that are part of our world today, and then we're going to wrap it up with some real-life examples that prove why mainframe integration with mobile, web, and cloud connectivity is not just a nice-to-have, but critical to operational performance. So with that being said, do we have the poll results that we could probably publish right now? Okay, well that's pretty interesting. All right, well thanks very much. So we'll go ahead and get started. Real quick, who is GT Software? Well, we have over 30 years' experience in helping businesses adapt and align their mainframe technology to support business strategy and performance. We've helped over 2,500 companies worldwide in an assortment of industries enhance their business performance by improving their access to the critical data and applications within their back-end systems. And over the years, we've seen a lot of changes in the technology and the way businesses leverage their mainframe to capitalize on improved business performance. However, never before has it been so critical to ensure that you and your mainframe are prepared for the explosion of enterprise mobility that's just around the corner. Before we take a look at the future of business performance, let's take a look back at how the mainframe has affected performance improvements over time. I apologize, the slides are not following up with me here. So if we look at the timeline on the next slide, in 1954, the same year the Mustang was introduced, Pepsi and Pop-Tarts were first released, the Beatles first hit the U.S., the IBM System 360 was introduced, and it would forever change business performance. In the 60s, developers designed and built application silos from an inside-out perspective to satisfy internal users in specific functions such as finance, sales, manufacturing, and other departments. However, in the 70s, the need to better share customer information drove the advent of online applications using transaction process monitors such as CICS. It also led to the creation of databases such as DB2 and IDMS in the 80s. And in the late 1990s, the e-business boom drove firms to expose internal-facing applications to customers via web browsers. Then also from the 90s to the early 2000s, companies attempted to repurpose some of their green screens using screen scraping type of technology. Yet screen scraping was and still remains very brittle, as changing the placement of one character can break the interface in multiple places. Other offerings scrape data from multiple websites back to a browser panel. Web scraping was even more brittle because new websites tended to change much faster than the old 30-year legacy applications. Today, this technology is becoming very irrelevant. However, today, just simple mobile access is no longer enough. Today, it's the companies that continue to innovate that keep the competitive advantage. So, for instance, let's take a look at some of these key statistics. By 2018, 25% of the Global 1000 will use customer-like applications and digital marketing to improve employee engagement. And according to Gartner Predicts 2014, organizations are starting to embrace consumerization as a corporate IT strategy. By 2015, more people will have access to a mobile device than a computer. And then by 2016, the average corporate device will integrate and orchestrate content at least from 5 different synchronization services. According to Cisco, the U.S. is the largest bring-your-own-device market with 71 million devices. And by 2016, the bring-your-own-device market is expected to grow to over 108 million devices. While many companies have entered into Mobility 1.0 or perhaps 2.0, the real test is getting your mainframe ready for Mobility 3.0. So let's go ahead and take a look of what that means in terms of mobility. In the May 12th edition of the Financial Express article, How Mobility Can Help Companies Create New Business Models, the author, Hina Jingun, describes 3 stages of mobility. You have Mobility 1.0, which is described as when companies seek to mobile enable or mobile optimize their websites with existing web applications and digital assets to increase productivity for employees and customers. But the challenge is to keep ahead of the proliferation and constant of flux within smart devices, development platforms, and mobile operating systems. With Mobile 2.0, however, organizations typically look to transform business process via mobility. For example, expense account reporting has always been a cumbersome process for employees, requiring them to save paper receipts. They have to fill out forms and then send everything to corporate accounts payable for payment. And then by contrast, a mobile-enabled expense submitting process is much quicker and easier. Employees only need to take pictures of their receipts and their smart device, categorize them with a simple pull-down menu, and click Submit button to send them to the accounting team. At this early stage of the mobility era, most companies are still at mobility levels 1.0 and 2.0. Few have yet ventured in the territory of mobility 3.0. So in the leap forward to mobility 3.0, organizations will leverage mobile technology to create entirely new business models and revenue streams. In 3.0, both B2B and B2C companies have greater opportunities to reach their target markets directly to improve profitability or add new customers. Mobile payments on feature phones as well as smartphones will enable access to new sectors of consumers. So the diagram here in terms of mobility, these are just some of the examples of companies that have successfully used Mobility 3.0 to improve productivity. If you look from left to right, WebEx and GoToMeeting has basically replaced people having to meet face-to-face in a conference room. The credit card Square Swiper has basically almost replaced the cash register. Even paper maps are being replaced by now GPS. And then now you have almost the replacement of phone, not only with the smart devices and mobile phones, but now even with the smart Samsung watch. And then, of course, you got to take into consideration coming soon the Internet of Things, when all devices and conveniences throughout our homes and businesses will be monitored and controlled via the Internet. With all this innovation, surprisingly, most companies are still only in Mobility 1.0. And particularly the large enterprise organizations that rely on business-critical legacy applications and data find it challenging to mobilize their core products and processes. So that brings us up to our next poll. Where are you in terms of your mobility strategy? So I'll give you a few minutes, or about 30 seconds, I should say, to answer. All right. So since the IT industry tends to evolve and carry forward rather than throw away and start over, most firms have plenty of applications that were initially written as far back as 40 years ago. And the resulting application portfolios are a patchwork quilt comprised of solutions built via painful evolution rather than today's cutting-edge technologies, and thus not an ideal foundation for building new mobile systems of engagement. Nevertheless, it is these legacy applications and systems that often hold the business-critical data that users are looking for, so providing real-time access to those back-end systems is paramount. Let's take a look at some of the real-life examples of how companies have done it, and in turn improved business performance and surpassed metrics that never before thought possible. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and introduce Troy Hayworth, GT Software's Vice President of Sales. Troy?
Thanks, Wilson. I appreciate that. And thank you, everyone, for joining. I know Wilson thanked you already, but I also want to say thank you. I appreciate it. I know you're busy. Before we jump into some case studies, maybe we can pull up those poll results right quick. Are they done? There we go. So that does align with some of the research we've seen. A lot of companies are still in Mobility 1.0. Only 7% feel they're at Mobility 3.0. And even more surprisingly, more than half the people that respond to the poll don't even have plans for mobility in the next year. So that's a little surprising. What we'd like to do is maybe look at the way some companies have used mobility to increase their performance, and specifically how they've tied mobility back to the mainframe to increase their performance. So we're going to look at the company, what their challenges were, what their needs were, what they did, and what they got out of that process. What were the results? How did it turn out? So we're going to look at a big box retailer here in the U.S. We're going to look at one of the U.S.'s leading airlines. We're going to look at a horse racing organization in France. No betting today, though. We're going to look at a benefits administrator and a full-service insurance provider. And we're not going to go deep into these. We're going to be very high level, but we are going to, again, discuss those needs, challenges, and results. Our first case study today is going to be presented by a partner of ours, a new partner called Catapult. And Catapult, as was discussed at the beginning, has an enterprise application mobility platform that helps companies out-mobilize their competition. And they help companies create apps quickly that are fast and personalized for their users, secure and manageable for IT, and they create useful outcomes for the business. And they do that in 60 days or less at a fraction of the cost of normal methods or normal approaches. So with that, I'd like to give it over to George Machini of Catavolt and let him tell you about a big box retailer they helped.
Thank you, Troy, and thank you all for your time today. I'd like to tell you a success story with a big box U.S. retailer that has quite a big footprint, lots of employees across many locations, a long history, and with that history, an IT asset base that has been built up over time, and lots of products in stock and lots of ways omni-channel that they reach their customers. In working with this retailer, their needs were similar to a lot of others in their market, in that in the brick-and-mortar stores, the amount of time that people spend and the amount of people that actually walk into the stores is being reduced year over year. As you can tell by the poll that we just did, there's not a lot of Mobility 3.0 projects that have gone on out there. That's an incredible opportunity for businesses to out-mobilize their competition, to take a step forward and differentiate using the Mobility 3.0. And that's exactly what this retailer wanted to do. They wanted to improve the customer experience, capture more sales by better service. But to do so, they had to deal with their existing IT asset base, which included a custom-written mainframe application that has grown over time. That application has been stress-tested and deployed to handle billions of dollars of transactions. Any change to it, to its logic, to the way the data flows through it, would have to undergo a very long process, one that would really extend out the deployment timeline. In addition, the mainframe application was written for a screen-by-screen interaction. As soon as we did the study of how associates interact with their customers in the aisle, we realized that it's a much more dynamic experience. So we had to map that system as it stood without changes to really a new paradigm of how folks interact with both each other and with technology. So we deployed a pilot, which then eventually moved on, that took their system as is and broke it down into a catalog of available functions and features. We were then able, through the platform, to create unified applications that not only interacted with the mainframe, but new sources of data. For example, the inventory information can come from the mainframe, but the .com side of the world can actually provide catalogs and pictures and more descriptions and text so that you could better service the customers. Bringing all that together into a mobile application that was extremely easy to use and had no boundaries, meaning they could span those systems, helped improve the customer experience. In tracking the results, what we found is that a key metric for retailers is the number of people that walk into a store versus the number of people that actually make a purchase that day. And we wanted to drive that number up by providing better service, allowing them to get the product, if not available in the store, then through the digital channel. They saw a 5% increase in the visitor buy rate, which is a tremendous metric. Another side effect came out from it, which is actually happier associates. What they found is they were training many folks that were new to the workforce onto text-based green screen type systems, and that was not translating well. Training them on mobile applications that are built for today's technology actually shortened the training time and led to better results on new associates. Troy, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, George. Appreciate that. So the next case study, we're going to jump back to myself, and what we're going to discuss now is I should advance that slide. I apologize. There we go. We're going to talk about a top U.S. airline, a household name that has about 300 mainline jet aircrafts and over 250 regional aircraft. They provide travel to over 330 destinations around the world and about 7,000 departures every day. So no small operation. And the challenge that they had is their maintenance procedures and their maintenance systems. So they always need to speed up maintenance procedures. It always needs to be faster. A plane not flying means unhappy customers and lost revenues. So they needed to speed that up. They needed to enhance the ability for their maintenance teams to access their support systems. That included parts inventories, maintenance records, their work order tickets. They wanted a single interface to those multiple systems so that the maintenance teams weren't switching from one system to the other. They wanted to move from fixed terminals to mobile devices. And why have a maintenance person walking from the equipment back over to a fixed terminal, back to the equipment? How many times per maintenance ticket does that happen? They wanted to simplify the interface to those back-end systems. They wanted a modern interface integrated against those back-end systems, and they wanted to do it rapidly without having to do a lot of hardcore coding changes. But there were a lot of challenges with doing this. The project drove changes to those legacy back-end systems that the entire system, and I'm not just talking the IT system, the entire system depended on. The flights that were leaving the ground depended on those maintenance systems. So there were changes to that back-end system that were very critical. They wanted new .NET-based graphical applications that needed seamless access to those legacy transactions and data. And the developers of those new applications had no knowledge of the legacy code bases. So it needed to be easy for them. You didn't want to have to retrain them. They operate in a heavily regulated industry. They have guidelines for repairs. They have guidelines for reporting those repairs. And they have guidelines on how delays are managed. So if those repairs suddenly cause a flight to be delayed, they're under regulatory watch at that point. So it's a heavily regulated industry. So how they implemented this was very important. And this was a very visible mission-critical project. It wasn't kind of a small project over in the corner there. It was something that everybody in the company saw and was paying attention to and was coming up in those weekly and sometimes daily meetings. So what did they do? They rolled out mobile access to those legacy applications and data. They allowed the maintenance people to remotely check parts inventory, file those maintenance reports, and manage those maintenance schedules. Now they have one interface on a mobile device for multiple systems, and that can be shared across all the employee bases that need access. And what were the further results in that? They had rapid app delivery. They were able to complete this project in approximately 4 months, when normally it might have taken a year or more to do that. And those rapid apps that they created, they had reusable services to the core IMS-based applications, which means later they can add additional capabilities without starting from scratch. They have greater efficiency. The airline staff and mechanics now have that flexible tablet access. They can improve their on-time statistics. A maintenance person doesn't have to go to a terminal to check parts inventory or switch between systems. This cuts time out of the process. We've all been on the plane when the mechanic's standing up front and we're delayed and we want to leave. Now he doesn't have to get off the plane, check parts, or order a part, or submit a requisition. He can do it from that cockpit. And as he's walking off the plane when he's done, he's submitting the paperwork. So this is greater efficiency for them. And increased profitability. The ability to report and repair mechanical issues faster and more efficiently reduces those operational costs. So GT Software and its Ivory suite of products allowed the IT team to quickly build those complex services to the legacy system and data with no coding. We're able to reuse mainframe services across many new experience apps, and we were able to allow external systems to call into the mainframe. And we're not going to do this on every one of these case studies, but I'll give you a quick architectural diagram of how the Ivory suite fit into this airline's solution. So the mobile devices are now going through the Ivory suite of products and using SOAP web services, authentication, and orchestration to reach the parts inventory, repair logs, maintenance systems that are sitting in IMS on the ZOS mainframe. And we're happy at any time, to go into a deep dive with any of you that are interested in it, but we did want to give a quick architecture. Again, we're not going to do this on every one of these. So let's talk about the next case study. The client was a horse racing organization in France, and they had 6 tracks they ran with 500 direct employees, and interestingly, 70,000 employees indirectly, via contractors or brokers or whatever it is. This actually came out of the merger of 3 of the large racing societies in France. The key thing about this client, or their case study, is that the majority of their revenue came from betting. So it's not, they're not selling a product, they're selling the hope and the dream of getting rich on that horse coming in. And those bets were placed directly with them and through third-party brokers. And I think we want to keep that third-party broker in mind because that's an important part of their needs and their challenges. So what were those needs? They needed more sales channels. They needed more opportunities for people to bet. Previously, it was at the track, via phone, or at that local broker. I'm sure if some of you have been to Europe, you see the local betting agencies as you walk around on the streets. But they wanted it to be web and mobile. They needed more channels to increase revenue. Their brokers needed more information, and they needed easier access to it. They needed to see the race schedules, see the horses, see the jockeys, be able to see the history of the horses and the jockeys so that they could provide it to their customers. And they wanted to do this via the web. They wanted to do it all in-house. They didn't want to hire outside personnel to do the project. So what made it hard? What were the challenges? They, like casinos here in the U.S., operate within a heavily regulated environment. They didn't want to rewrite the legacy mainframe-based DB2 and other applications. They wanted to leave them as they were. This project impacted their revenue stream directly. If there was a hiccup, they could lose revenue. They could bring that revenue stream to a complete stop. So they didn't want to impact that primary source of revenue. And interestingly enough, when they started discussing this project, the management team already started counting the increased revenue. I'm sure we've all experienced that. They were already spending the money before it was there. So management was looking at that project, and they were betting on the increased revenue. So what were the results? What did they do? They created those web services that allowed their own developers to create applications that were used for web and mobile bidding. But they also allowed their brokers to access that web service, those web services, to create their own capabilities. They created a better broker portal using those web services that allowed them faster access to information that they and their customers needed. And so that was their core solution. So it started with the web services that they could use and their brokers could use. Then they went to the next step and used them in their own mobile bidding capability. There were 80 web services in that were, again, for internal and external use. They published them for the developers. They used them in their own apps. They used them in their own portals. So what did this bring them? Increased awareness. So when customers could now bid on their phone or their website or their tablet, they had increased awareness of these racetracks. When the brokers could publish this information mobily, again, awareness within the public went up. You weren't having to go to the racetrack to be a bettor. Most importantly, though, revenue increased. If you can bet more places, you can buy more places, there's more revenue to be had. The next client we're going to look at is a specialty benefits administrator. I didn't know what that was, but what it is someone that administers retirement benefits, health and welfare plans. I'm sure several of you on the phone know what those are. You probably work for one, but I didn't know what a specialty benefits administrator was. But I know that I use them every day. This particular one specialized in short-term, temporary health policies. They also adjudicate claims. They do that for emergency services, physicians, and the indigent population. And this is like I said, these are things I use every day. These are important and emotional things for their clients. When you have a health benefit claim, you want information now. You want it to be accurate. You want to feel good about that when you get off the phone or off the web with your provider. If it's your retirement benefit, you want to have solid information for that. So these are important and emotional things, and it needs to be easy and fast and comfortable. So what were their needs? Well, amazingly enough, this benefit provider provided their access to information via office visits or telephone only. In 2013, I think 2014, as they started this project, customers were having to call in and go to an office. They didn't have mobile access or web access. So they wanted to, and really they had to, provide physicians, members, and other providers self-service access. They wanted to eliminate the high call volume they had, and so that they could redeploy full-time employees. In their own words, they said they had to modernize quickly or they would be out of business. That's incredible to think a company that is good size like this were on the verge of going out of business because they hadn't modernized. And they hadn't modernized because those things were on the mainframe. So what were the challenges that they had? The implemented solution had to access the information and integrate against 3270 screens. Green screens, for those of you that don't know 3270. I think most of you probably do, but they had to go against those old green screens. The solution they had in place had been homegrown for the past 20 years, and we all know those can be fun to modernize or integrate against. And the system was running on Software AG's Complete, which probably isn't the most widespread platform out there. Finding knowledge about Complete isn't super simple, but that's what they were running on. So now they've taken and modernized their solution, and now they have a fully serviceable front end for the end user policy holders or account holders and third parties that need access to it, whether that be benefit administrators or physicians. They were able to leverage existing .NET skills. They didn't bring in additional full-time employees to complete this project. They developed and deployed this project within 3 months. I have to say that's impressive. When we redo our website here, 3 months is fast, and we're not integrating against the mainframe. So that's very impressive. For the cost of a few full-time employees, they were able to revolutionize their services and, in their own words, save the organization. When I mentioned 3270, I'm sure that there were people listening that thought, oh, screen scraping. This solution is not screen scraping. It's an intelligent integration and orchestration of information and services. They were able to customize and choose what to present to who, when, and how, and authenticate levels of access. A doctor might be able to see certain things, a user able to see more things, and an administrator able to see less things. But they all came from those original 3270 screens. All Our last case study is an insurance provider here in the U.S., and they're in 11 states. They have 1 million policies, got about 400 offices in their 11-state territory, and they got a little over 2,300 employees. And they believe themselves to be and try to be a technology-savvy company, and they try to use it to increase productivity and customer service. In fact, I know they had a mobile app. It wasn't tied to their mainframe, but they had a mobile app before a lot of insurance companies their size had one. So what were their needs? They needed real-time remote insurance quotes. And that really, sometimes maybe that doesn't seem very impressive. I get that from Geico, right? But what they needed is they were sending salespeople out into the field, and they were doing insurance quotes that weren't real. They were based on a calculator on their laptop that took the information their clients gave them and calculated a quote. And they gave the client a quote that was a hopefully maybe. And then they went back to the office. They loaded up the information the client gave them. It went to the mainframe, and they got the real quote. And the next day they sent that back to the customer. And there was often, at a very high rate, shock. Maybe the shock was, wow, this is such a better quote. But sometimes the shock was, wow, this is double what you told me yesterday. And they weren't closing customers right there on site. So they needed access to the policy and rating information on site, on their tablet, their laptop, and their mobile. They needed those customers to be happy right there on site, not shocked and angry the next day. And they needed those accurate quotes. So what were the challenges that they faced as they were doing this? The policy rating, when they went on site, they had to take an inventory. You're insuring jewelry, TVs, art, equipment, cars. They needed to do an inventory, and it needed to go back into the mainframe. Their real-time policy and rating engines were on the mainframe. And those of you that deal with those know those aren't simple little algorithms. They're huge. And so they needed access to that in real time while they were sitting with their customer. They had to have access to all of their policy systems. They needed to see past accounts, current accounts, be able to make sure they had the right Mr. Smith when they were at his house. And they needed to make sure that all the discount rates were applied. If I've been a 20-year customer, I want my 20-year discount. If I'm under 25, I want my under 25 discount. So they need to make sure that all of that got applied. And that tied back to other systems besides the rating engine. And I don't know about you, but if I've been doing business with you for 10 years, I want you to know that. I don't want to have to tell you that so that you can then calculate my discount. So what did they do? And what were the results? They put in place true real-time mobile access to those mainframe systems. Their employees, their field sales agents now have real-time access via mobile to policy information and the rating engines. They didn't repurpose or rewrite any code on the back end. It was truly just access to it. The services that they wrote and created so that can happen can be reused later for other applications. So if they maybe create agents and the agents need access, they can create an agent portal using those same services and that same mainframe access to give them the ability. They can also update policies now. So it's not just rating and quoting. It's, you've got my middle initial wrong, let's go ahead and correct it. My age is wrong. My second home, let's get that in there and get the address correct. So the agents in the field now can make sure that everything's correct while they're there. It's not a, we'll call you tomorrow to correct it. One of the most important things is that now they give their customers a real quote right then while on site and can close the sale right then while on site. Instead of waiting until the next day and potentially getting the sale and delaying revenue coming to the company by 24, 48, 72 hours, they're getting revenue and the closed deal right then and right there while they have the customer. And I'm sure we all know, if you're like me, the minute I walk out of the Best Buy, I'm probably not buying the TV. But if they sell me while I'm there, then the sale's done. Same thing here. They were also able to use those web services in other ways, not just quoting. Now, managers can have access to some of the information faster. They can address agents' commission in real time. They can track sales in real time. So it's easier for them to give incentives to the sales team that's out in the field today. Maybe today we want to give a bonus of $100 to the first agent to close the deal today. They can do that in real time now. They can see a real sale happening. So, in summary, we've looked at 4 different industries really today in 5 case studies: retail, airlines, betting, and insurance. And they all found ways to leverage their existing technology and applications that sat on their mainframe. And with mobile, these companies made it possible for their employees to be more productive and efficient. They revolutionized their employees' performance. And for many companies, that really is true. The one company said it saved them. So that revolutionized performance provided, as George said, increased employee satisfaction, increased customer satisfaction, lower costs, and increased revenues. So we appreciate your time today. We hope we've been able to give you a brief glimpse of how your mainframe can be a huge part of your own Mobility 3.0 business performance revolution. With that, again, thank you for your time, and we'll turn it back over for questions.
Excellent job, guys. Thanks. Let's see. We'd like to take some time now to answer some questions from our attendees. That would be you folks. Looks like we have a number of people in the audience today, so don't worry if we don't get to your specific question. We will follow up via email. Again, if you have any questions, use that Q&A panel on the lower right-hand side of your screen to send it in. And with that, let's take a look at what we got in. Okay, what verticals are you seeing where the mainframe is lagging behind in terms of participating with newer technologies?
Okay. An interesting one has been insurance. The big guys have done it, but we're seeing from the analysts, and it's backed up by a lot of the analyst reports, that the insurance industry, from a mobile perspective, lags. And that's probably one of the most readily apparent. It's typically the mid-market ones like we discussed in our last case study.
That's interesting, particularly since it's such an intrinsically mobile friendly sort of app. So
yeah.
Let's see, another one. What do you do if you need to deliver an interface to multiple platforms or different devices?
Yeah, I'll take that one. That's probably more geared towards our partner, Catapult. They have a very interesting platform. It's very unique. It actually fits the same paradigm as our technology, which is rapid application development, integration without any coding or no coding, so to speak. But in any case, what they have is a platform that you build once and you deploy everywhere. So in other words, you can build that interface, that mobile interface, if that's what you want to call it, but you can also deploy it, to a web, to a smart device, to any type of phone, and what have you. So they take care of that.
Okay, good. Let's see, another one. How do you handle security and authentication?
Right. Yep. So from the standpoint, as it relates to the mainframe, we adhere by all of those security standards. We also have a best practices guide, depending on if there's a different way that you'd like to employ your security, which we haven't found or ran across any issue. But typically we adhere by, the standard RAC F, top secret, so on and so forth. And we can basically support whatever security that you currently have or wish to have. We're very flexible in that deployment.
Good. Let's see. Any other questions? Your window is closing because we're running out of time. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Good. Let's see. Well, thanks, Troy, Wilson, George, for sharing your expertise with us today. Just a quick note to attendees. We will be sending out a link early next week to a recording of today's presentation for all of you, as well as for anyone who registered for the event but for whatever reason couldn't make it. And with that, I believe we are at the end of our webinar session today. Thanks again for taking the time to attend, and have yourselves a great day.